I'm Katie Pavlich here at townhall.com, and we are with Adam Kissel, who was with FIRE, which is the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, and he just gave a speech about liberty in our universities and how people are learning to undo liberty, even though universities are supposed to be this arena of academic thought and free speech, right? But today they're not necessarily. So could you explain a little bit about why our universities are really the most shut down places for free speech in our society?
It's really pretty crazy that the most oppressive places in America are the American campuses. Mm-hmm. Two-thirds of public universities have unconstitutional speech codes, blatantly unconstitutional. Right. Private universities promise free speech, almost all of them do, and they don't deliver. They have speech codes too.
Right.
So instead of being able to think the unthinkable, mention the unmentionable, like the universities advertise, you have residence life people, you have all of these offices for diversity that are telling students, no, not only shouldn't you say the things that offend people, but you can't, and we'll punish you if you do.
So universities kind of falsely advertise in terms of they lure students in, making it seem like this open thought society where you can learn and express your opinion, but you get there and it ends up being this completely shut down, you better think this way or you're going to be punished kind of place.
Yes, it starts with the residence life people. You get to campus and they give you an orientation. Mm-hmm. They tell you, you've been indoctrinated for the first 18 years of your life and we're going to undo it right now.
Right.
So all the things you learned were wrong. And in order to have the right community values and the right kind of citizenship, you have to follow our rules.
Right.
Well, that should be maybe what you get at the end of your 4 years of education. You've thought it through, you've thought about what you really believe, and okay, maybe you end up with those same values.
Right.
But the worst education of all is when they say, here are the values you have to have just to be a member of our community.
Give us some statistics on freshmen versus seniors in college and how they kind of start out with a more open mind and they kind of end up with this one pattern of thinking because of the indoctrination at universities and the lack of allowing free speech on campus.
Well, the good students can withstand it.
Yeah.
They're not just weak vessels where everyone's pouring information into them.
Mm-hmm.
The ones who think for themselves and actually go after a good education get it.
Right.
But a lot of students only take the classes where people tell them what they want to hear. Mm-hmm. They take the highly politicized classes instead of really stretching themselves. And those are the ones who don't get the college experience that they should have gotten. Maybe at the end of it, they don't change their minds, and it's because they've thought it through. But for most of them, they don't change their minds because they've never been challenged.
Right. We all know that these days universities are pretty much completely controlled by liberal thought. Adam has helped me when I was at the University of Arizona. He helped us on numerous occasions when we had issues with the university imposing unconstitutional speech fees. When we had David Horowitz come, he threatened to shut down our event. We also had another incident where we wanted to show a film on campus, and all of a sudden they had some other time scheduled after they had already booked, and we had documentation. So I know you deal with hundreds of cases a year. I mean, how do people outside of universities hear about this, but they don't really kind of know what's going on? How do you think students can really get the message out to the outside world about what's going on at their university?
That's a great idea. Because I think if the average citizen knew what was really going on campus, they would be outraged. So getting the word out, as we said at the panel, sunlight is one of the best disinfectants. Colleges will not continue to do in public what they try to get away with in private. So the student newspapers, the conservative and liberal newspapers, special interest, maybe they should be distributing off campus, not just on campus in their local community, and going to the city and saying, look what's happening right in your neighborhood. I am more free on the public sidewalk than I am on the college campus, and that's a mistake.
I know that FIRE helps everyone. It's not political. If you're, like you said in your speech, if your rights have been violated, FIRE will help you. But we do see this extremely disproportionate discrimination against conservative students versus liberal students when it comes to the university. Why do you think that is?
That has been our experience. The vast majority of cases are conservative students and student organizations being discriminated against or having their rights violated. And it's usually not because of the faculty. It's usually because of the administrators who think that the faculty aren't doing a good enough job teaching special citizenship values, and they need to show that their $100,000 or $200,000 a year are worth something. So they pass speech codes, they enforce speech codes, and then they provide the statistics showing how good they've been by cracking down on all the bad people on campus. So it's usually the administrators, and they also have the completely wrong view about what it is to be in college. Their idea because we need to protect weak students from the hurt feelings that they might experience.
Right.
But it's the professors who are actually, the good ones, who are trying to spur the students to really learn something and stretch themselves.
Right.
If the universities were run by the faculty like they used to be, instead of by this big army of administrators, I think you would see much, much less of this kind of indoctrinating and one-sidedness on campus.
Right. So, does this whole indoctrination and one way of thinking obviously degrades education? Like you said, the average graduation for a four-year college is a 6-year plan now. How do you think this has affected our education system as a whole in producing graduates from college who have a valuable degree? And we see now that a lot of the time your college degree doesn't mean much in terms of getting a job. It just seems like everyone can get one if you get one. And if you do, it kind of depends on how much really you've done outside of your degree in college to well-round your education.
Well, there are a lot of issues in what you said. And having 6 years to learn a lot of lessons about liberty and not learning them probably should be a strike against you.
Right.
You can talk to a plumber who didn't go to college, and they might have better ideas about being fair about liberty than a college student who's had course after course and experience after experience where they've been taught that the right thing to do is to stamp out the speech you don't like instead of letting the debate happen. So if you take the right courses, again, if you're a student with a certain amount of vigor, a certain amount of drive, you can learn a lot. And in fact, it's the conservative students who tell us that they learn the most in college because they are always having to defend, they're always challenged, always having to defend what they believe. It's the liberal students who learn the least because they're in the environment where people are simply repeating back what they already believed and not really investigating another point of view.
Briefly, if you could just explain what a speech code is. A lot of our viewers don't know what a speech code is. It's this foreign thing that only happens at universities. They don't really know what it is, so briefly you could explain that.
Cities have speech codes too sometimes,
right.
But it's true that they're most often at the universities where there's a rule that restricts speech substantially. And what that means is the rule will say, if you annoy someone else, we're going to get you for punishment.
Right.
If you bother someone else too much, if you, in any of these different ways, say something that we think you shouldn't be saying, we're not just going to tell you you're a bad person or think you shouldn't have said that, you're being uncivil. We're going to get you for punishment. So these speech codes have teeth. It's not just we think you're a bad person. It's you're going to come before the judiciary and you might be expelled.
Right.
We have students get expelled for peaceful protest, nonviolent, non-disruptive, or a Facebook line, I don't like my teacher.
Right, and we've seen students too, and the problem is that students who are discriminated against their rights are violated. It's hard for them to go against their faculty, the administration, for fear of repercussion. Yes. So it's this kind of vicious cycle where if you speak up, you lose. Don't speak up, you lose.
Yes, what we have is this chilling effect. If there's a speech code on the books, and you're one of these enterprising students who's actually read your Code of Student Conduct and Student Handbook, which few do, it's nice to know the regime you live under should actually read the rules.
Right.
You say, I would rather just not introduce any controversial issues into my speech in class or outside of class because I don't want to face the punishment. That's that chilling effect, just to not be prosecuted, just to not be troubled by maybe getting expelled. I'm going to not say all kinds of things that I wish I could say.
Which is very unfortunate because then your experience in college, like you said, is not very well rounded and it's very one stream. Right. And you don't get exposed to a lot of the diversity that they preach in our college campuses.
Yes, intellectual diversity is last on the list if it shows up at all.
Right. Well, you have been successful eliminating speech codes. They used to be 90% of universities had them, correct? Now it's down to about 60%?
Before we kept really careful records, we were estimating up in the 80s or even as high as 90%.
Right.
And now it's down to 67%.
Great.
The last 3 years we've seen a trend. And more schools are going green, which means green light. We have this rating system, right? So if you have unconstitutional speech codes, red light. If you have no unconstitutional policies that we can find, green light. And we're getting one or more per year going green. And it's because of a number of factors. One is that university administrators realize that they can be personally sued now that they know they have speech codes. And it's one thing if someone sues the school, but it's another thing if somebody sues you.
Right, yep, so gets personal real quick.
They're starting to see that they don't want to be on the other side of that. And second, the moral argument is winning. The intellectual diversity argument is winning. People are seeing that some deans of students are seeing that protecting students from hurt feelings isn't their job, but encouraging debate and discussion is their job.
Great. So how can students get in touch with you if they have a problem?
They can go to the website at thefire.org, hit the button for submit a case, or they can email me directly at adam@thefire.org.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you too.
Thank you so much.